Baruch Hashem.
This meeting is being recorded.
Well, I guess if somebody listens to a recording and there's not much being said, they're not going to get much out of it, huh? Um, this week's parashat is presumably parashat Yitro, and it starts in Shemot or Exodus chapter 18. And as it begins, it speaks of Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moshe's father-in-law, heard all that Yah did for Moshe and for his people, Israel, that Elohim took out Israel from Egypt. Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moshe's wife, after she'd been sent away, and her two children, of whom the name of the first was Gershom, for he said, I was an alien in a foreign land. And the name of the other was Eleazar, because my father's Elohim was my help, and he rescued me from Pharaoh's sword. So it states that Yitro came with Moshe's children and wife in the desert where he was camping by the mountain of Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. And then he announces to Moshe, I, your father-in-law Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and your two children with her. And following the laws of hospitality, Moshe went out to greet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him, then asked about each other's welfare, and they entered the tent. Now, this is an interesting parashat because it has several precedent-setting areas. And so, first we're introduced to Yitro a little bit more. That can be a discussion all within itself, as he has several names that is mentioned all throughout the Tanakh. Yitro is considered to be meaning abundance or excellence. He's also called Ruel or Hobab, and he was a priest of Midian for the Kenite clan, with whom Moshe took refuge after he killed an Egyptian. Now, we also know that Yitro, as it is in his root word, Yitr, meaning abundance, there's not too many people that chose to have the name Yitro, which is interesting all by itself. Yitro represents an abundance within itself of study area, depending on how finitely we would like to study. And so we have within this the first real precedent-setting area besides the laws of hospitality. He states that Moshe told his father-in-law all that Yah did to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians on Israel's behalf, and of all the hardships that they went through on the way, and how Yahweh rescued them. So, through it all, Yitro was impressed with the witness that he received about Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, and Yitro responded by blessing the Most High And he says, because of the witness that he heard from Moshe, and after he blessed the Most High, he said that now he knows as well that Yod-Heh-Wahi is greater than all the gods, because that which they plotted to do was turned against them. So we have Yitro giving a witness here that he accepts that the Most High is greater than all the other gods. Yet still later on, we find Yitro chooses not to dwell with Moshe and all of Israel. He goes about his own way again. So it makes for an interesting change of affairs, especially when we read later what happens with not only the clan that he's a priest over, but what happens when the Midianites themselves seem to forget Moshe had been a part of them and starts making war on Israel. So this area here is a precedent-setting area for how things can change. We also have a change here stating in verse 18 and chapter 18, verse 13, that on the following day, Moshe sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moshe from morning to evening. Moshe's father-in-law saw all that he was doing concerning the people. And so he says, what is this thing that you're doing with the people? Why do you sit by yourself with all the people standing around you from morning till evening? And Moshe answered, because the people come to me to inquire of Elohim. When they have a problem, they come to me. Now, look carefully at what it says out of the crown. Okay? I judge between one man and his fellow, and I inform them of Yod-Heh-Wahi statutes and teachings. So this is before the 10 words were given on the Mount. This is before Moshe's communications with the Most High were all written down that form the supposed 365 commandments. And then we have the statutes, and we have everything that is given to us in Torah from the Most High through Moshe. But here, Moshe is saying straightforwardly that he's teaching Torah to the people to show them why the disputes are being settled the way they're being settled. And so there's evidence here between what Moshe has learned from the tribes, princes, and what the Most High has reminded him between the Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We had oral Torah before we ever had written Torah that had nothing to do with rabbinical Judaism or Pharisaic Judaism. Because nothing had begun to be written down yet. And yet, he's still teaching them of Yahweh's Torah. And then Yitro responds, and he makes an observation. He says, what you are doing is not good. Now, Moshe is informed that informed his father-in-law he's using Torah as a basis for settling disputes. And yet the first response from him is that what you're doing is not good. Now, taking that phrase, when Yeshua was told in the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, that he was good, he said only the Father is good. So now Yitro is making a statement that Moshe is not good. So we would have to say that that statement is correct. What you're doing is not good. You will certainly wear yourself out, as well as these people that is with you. For this thing is too much for you, and you cannot do it alone. He said, so the word here in English says, listen to me. But the word there in Hebrew is actually Shema. Okay? Let me counsel you, and may Elohim be with you. You represent the people before Yodewah, and bring their matters before him. Advise them of the statutes and the teachings, inform them of the path they should tread and the things they should do. Seek among the people wealthy men, people that are reverend the Most High, trustworthy men who detest unfair gain, and appoint them as officers of thousands, officers of hundreds, officers of fifties, and officers of tens. Let them judge the people at all times. And it shall be that any great matter that they bring before you, and all light matters, they will judge themselves. They will relieve you and bear with you. If you do this thing and Yahweh commands you, you will be capable of bearing it. And all these people will go to their homes in peace. From this precedent-setting passage, we've done this ever since. In study houses and groups and assemblies, we still work with not just 10 people, but 10 marriages, 10 families, and we have a righteous man over that. And then when you have 50 people and you have 10 men that are over the 50 people, you have another that is over all 50 of the people. So for 50 people, you have 6 leadership positions. This is how the minyan was born. The 10 men of the minyan over an assembly. This was the premise of that. Most assemblies today, they don't number to be very great. They might be 100, 200, 300. But you can't have that many people living that close to a synagogue. And so you have a tendency to have synagogues in different neighborhoods just because of the need, in an original sense, not to travel beyond a Shabbat's day walk. In an Orthodox sense, it's been a practice for 2,000 years to walk to the synagogue or to the study house every Shabbat and walk home, both summer and winter. So that there's a limited time in travel and more time spent before the Most High in study and praise and worship. I'm not suggesting everybody have to give themselves to a Shabbat day walk. I'm only sharing with you what has been historical and traditions amongst our people and why. Now, of course, you have waking up back today in this moment. We have modern day society. And so you might desire to go to a synagogue that's 15, 20 miles or more away from you. You wouldn't be able to get there if you didn't start walking on Thursday or Friday morning. And you would lose part of your labor for the week walking back home again. So then everybody says, well, let's use our vehicles of transportation, whatever kind of vehicle we have. Motorized, horse and wagon, whatever it happened to be within history. So people began to do as the Varim has taught not to do. Instead of doing things according to your own decisions, we do them according to his decisions. And then you have people who will use religious language to say, this is what he put on my heart to do. Who can argue with that? So whether it's based on religious language, convenience, tradition, people gradually started to do what seemed right in their own eyes again. So I'm using this as a basis to let you see, just as this was precedent setting for the way we would have some order in our study houses, our assemblies, our synagogues, um, whether you want to call it a temple or you want to call it several other names that are popular, whether you speak Yiddish or German or any other language, um, they are our assemblies. So I need you to keep a open heart and an open way of thinking to see from the point that this was first taught as a precedent through the centuries that followed till now, we still have the core of this, but even with this, we changed it in modern day times to a minyan, 10 men to a synagogue, 10 men to an assembly, each with his own responsibility. Usually, of those 10 men, you've got between 1 to 3 rabbis, an older rabbi with 1 or 2 in training, or 1 or 2 in subordination. In some synagogues, they don't have the money to pay everybody. So usually only the head rabbi is getting paid. There's a lot of different things that can come up. I'm sharing with you so that you'll have a better understanding of how things went in different directions from where this precedent setting passage originated here. And yet, what have we eventually done with it? I say we because it concerns all of us. You have a few people that desire to do things as it was originally done, yet still you have the flexibility of modern living that has a strong tendency to bring things about in different ways. So you're left with basic decisions in each group and each assembly. How much of Torah are you going to have in your assembly? How much of it are you going to live by? How much of it are you going to go by? How much of it is too inconvenient and too strict for you to abide by? Do you feel like you're going to make up your own mind, or you feel like you're going to follow Torah? If so, how much of Torah are you going to follow? And what are you going to consider Torah to be? The definition of Torah has never changed. It is still teaching, instruction, direction. So I'm using this as an example here so that you can see how much, even though this was how this was set up, how much it has changed since then with the people that everybody goes to for understanding. Having set up a minyan instead, 10 men, if you have 10 men for every 50, then from those 10 men times 5, where are the other men that are over each 10 men or 10 people or 10 families? So I'm sharing this with you so you can have your eyes open a little bit. Then it becomes a matter of prayer to find out what the Most High is doing with this. Since Moshe accepted this as advice and counsel coming from the Most High, it was implemented. It remained in existence all the way through the Second Temple period. It remained in existence all the way into and beyond Palestinian Judaism. It was in existence in Pharisaic Judaism. It was only with the advent of Rabbinical Judaism that it started going through changes. And they said we started those changes and went through those changes because we were scattered in so many different countries and we had to work with the amount of people we had. In some countries through the centuries, there may have only been 10 or 20 families in a synagogue. That may have been the entire village, the entire town, where Jews had to cluster and form around each other to survive. If it grew to where there was 30 or 40 families, that would have been considered a larger place to live, still with commerce going on. And some of the Jews only doing commerce with each other, some of the Jews doing commerce with others outside of their community. And so the communities were at first based on this order, not just for the assembly, but for everything going on in their lives and their communities. So it wasn't just for a synagogue service, because you might see the man that was appointed over the 10 families or 10 people in different days of the week, as anything might come up to settle whatever was going on.
It appears that Jethro was encouraging Moses to pick some guys and delegate some of the responsibility to them, because the burden was too much for Moses by himself. So he delegated some of the responsibility to other people then who were able to do it.
Agreed. Agreed completely. No argument at all there. It's considered a universal understanding there on that point. Now, it talks about wealthy people. Who were these wealthy people that were chosen, these righteous men? Anybody have an idea? Michael?
I think they would have been like leaders within their family, so firstborn males. I don't know
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's limited to those, but that's who's naturally going to be chosen.
The firstborn, with the right of the firstborn priest, yes. They've always been with us, and so it made sense that they would be chosen, because the firstborn priests were always over their families, their clans, and their tribes. Absolutely. They're also called princes of their tribes. They've been called the wealthy of the tribes, the righteous of the tribes. All of these apply to the firstborn. Now, as we continue with this, these are the precedent-setting areas. And 24, of course, as John has said, Moshe accepted the advice of his father-in-law, did everything he said. This also shows that Moshe was still humble enough to take good counsel and implement it and put it into use. He did that. They were appointed heads over people, officers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. They judged the people at all times, not just once a week or once in a while, at all times. Every time something came up, they would bring the difficult matters before Moshe, and they judged all light matters themselves. And then it says Moshe allowed his father-in-law to leave, and he went his way to his country. It's interesting. Now in chapter 19, we have verse 3 and 4, which is a real interesting passage. Moshe ascended to Yahweh. Elohim called to him from the mountain, saying, say as follows to the house of Yaakov, and tell the children of Israel something. So for those that have been taught already, you already see how the Most High makes a difference between the sons of Israel and the house of Yaakov. Okay? You saw what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now, this expression is an idiomatic expression being carried on eagle's wings. This is saw in different places throughout the Tanakh. We would have to do a separate study to completely cover that and where it comes from as an idiomatic phrase, but it's used in reference to things that the Most High does at different times. Now, look at this statement, okay? How I carried you on eagle's wings and I brought you to me. Now, does that make really much sense in English? I brought you to me. Mark, if you were bringing somebody, would you be able to bring them to you, or would you be bringing them someplace else in English?
To me?
Oh, to you?
Yes.
If you're bringing them, are they with you already?
Yes.
Yet it says he brought them to himself. So we gained an understanding that you can actually gain in English if you look for it, that there had to be some means, some mechanism that he would have brought them to him. So he used the events, their travels. He used the prophet, not from the tribe of Levi, Moshe and his brother Aharon. And they led the people out, following the Most High's commands, one by one. And so by all those means, he brought them to himself. In Hebrew, it has an interesting verbiage that wouldn't make much sense in English, saying that I brought you to me. Now, this indicates that he brought our people to himself. That means that depending on what happened in the wilderness and the centuries beyond, there's times where we've left him and we've had to come back a few times. But this is another precedent-setting area where he actually says, I brought you to me. You didn't come to me because you wanted to. I purchased you from Pharaoh. I brought you to me. So we made the journey as a people. It says so right here. He brought us to him. Everybody with me?
Yes.
Now, if you take this into consideration, that lets us know that since he brought us to him then, every time we come back, it is a shuv, a return. Every time we repent, we have to return. Because he set the precedent here, I brought you to me. Also makes you wonder how come we didn't take the time to consider staying with him in the first place. Everybody with me so far?
Every time I get in a Zoom conference, Adobe Flash Player interrupts me. So I think we're going to go out for just a minute and come back. Bear with us, if you will.
Of course. Shabbat shalom.
Oh, here we are. Yay. Every
That
blessed
was a
time.
quick trip.
Every time that Adobe Flash Player thing comes on.
Okay. Now in verse 5 of 19, now, if you shall earnestly hearken to my voice and observe my covenant, you will be my most treasured of all nations, for the entire earth is mine. Here he sets up terms. You will be for me a priestly kingdom and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall tell the children of Israel. So, my question is he speaking to the house of Yaakov here implicitly, or is he only speaking to the children of Israel? Because before he started talking, he said, say as follows to the house of Yaakov and tell the sons of Israel. Children of Israel is B'nai Israel. They tried in a modern day sense to say that means children, but originally B'nai means sons only, because the sons represent the families of everybody else.
I'm
So,
going to say he spoke to the Jewish nation throughout the Old Testament, through the prophets. There's a thread that runs through it. The children of Israel are disobedient. They worship other gods. They burn incense to other gods.
your earpiece, take it.
God is angry and punishes them, but he loves them, and he always brings them back into fellowship with him.
Okay, I respect that understanding. But he does make a difference here.
Yes.
And that's done in an obvious, explicit way. He starts to say this to both of them, and then he emphasizes, these are the words that you shall tell B'nai Israel, the sons of Israel. So, as you're beginning to see in this parashot, there are some things that set up a precedence and a premise for them to follow as we go along beyond the parashot.
I guess I don't completely understand the distinction between the house
Well,
of
you'll find all through Torah and even in the prophets, he makes a difference between the house of Yaakov and the house of Israel, and he makes a difference between the house of Yaakov and the sons of Israel in numerous places.
then he's speaking just particularly to the sons of Jacob, not to the sons of the other brothers.
Now, the reason this is confusing is because from verse 4 through verse 6, if you remember, we didn't always have chapter and verse delineation.
Right.
And so someplace in this passage, it went from speaking to both to speaking to one. Now, the other issue I'll tell you is in English, it says here, say as follows, using the word say to the house of Yaakov. And then it says, tell the children of Israel in English, which is B'nai Israel. On the Hebrew side, there is a difference between how they address the house of Yaakov and how they address the sons of Israel. And then in verse 7, he summons the elders of the people and set before them all the words that Yahweh commanded him. And then all of the people replied together, everything that Yahweh spoke, we shall do.
Well, that's where their trouble began. Throughout their history, they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So the Lord had to chastise them, allow them to be carried into captivity even, but he always forgave them.
This is true throughout the centuries. Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yodhe. And we have Vayomer again. Yahweh said to Moshe, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear me speaking to you, and that they will believe in you forever. Now, again, we have this word forever. Now, again, as it has been said, in English, the word forever seems to continue. However, the definition of forever in Hebrew means to the extent of what is known or the extent of known knowledge. Now, the reason the definition was put in here biblically, even in Torah, is because what the Most High has revealed is always ours. It stays with us. And what is not revealed belongs only to the Most High. It's His. And so from that basis, the word forever came to mean to the extent of what is known. The extent of what is known is what has been revealed to us. So we feel like forever constitutes all that the Most High has revealed, whether people live it or not.
Yes.
Now, Moshe reported to Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh the words of the people. Now, this is repeated again because at the end of verse 8, Moshe brought back the words of the people to Yah. And then Yah spoke to Moshe. And then it says again at the end of verse 9, Moshe reported to Yahweh the words of the people.
Mhm.
Now, why do we have this doubling? We don't see anything in between from where he said it the first time to where he said it the second time. This doubling yet and still has a point because it's there. It has a place because it's there. It isn't simply just a style of writing. The doubling always gives an emphasis. We have, even though we know that the Most High is omnipresent,
Mhm.
omnipotent, we still have a man that he chose as a prophet and commissioned to be the God over the God of this world. He still has this man bring the words of the people back to him, even though he's heard the words of the people. So he has not negated this interaction. He uses this kind of interaction in sequence continually, even to times today. In Revelation, we have something similar where it speaks in chapters 2 and 3, where it says that he speaks to the seven assemblies. He speaks to the angel of the seven assemblies, the cantor, the Hassan, the messenger. And these things I'm well pleased, and these things I have against you, and he's judging. He doesn't speak to the people, even though he can hear them. He speaks to the messenger, the cantor, the angel of the assembly instead. This is the way it's set up. So we can see from the time it's spoken of here until we see it again in Revelation, it's used in between there as well. There is, based on what we have and what we study between the Tanakh, the New Testament, prophets that were not included in the canon, it never ceases to be where the Most High chooses men one way or another, and he speaks to them. They go to the people, And then those men come back to him, whether they are prophets or priests or kings. And then the Most High speaks to Moshe, go to the people, prepare them today and tomorrow, and let them launder their clothes. Let them be ready for the third day, for on the third day, Yahweh shall descend. He's speaking of himself in the second person, in full view of the people on Mount Sinai. Set a border for the people all around and say, take care not to go up the mountain or touch its boundary. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely die. He's introducing himself in a broader degree, but he's setting perimeters up to protect the people from being too close to his set apartness. Let no hand touch it, for he shall certainly be stoned or thrown down. Neither man nor beast or man shall live. Now, he's only talking about his set apartness, his holiness.
Amen.
This is an area that isn't really taught a lot about, is his set apartness itself. It's automatically there. When messengers come on doing something the Most High told them to do, they have set apartness coming from the Most High. They are set apart doing what he told them to do. And at times, they impart portions of that set apartness. When Moshe was at the burning bush, there was set apartness because he said, take your shoes off.
Yeah.
This is set apart ground because of this presence, the fire.
Yeah.
Anytime he reveals something, part of his set apartness is there. Every time he touches our heart, we feel that set apartness. Every time even his spirit is active with his presence with us, we feel that set apartness. When he imparts the fruit of the Spirit to us, we feel that set apartness. And that's because, as explained in the prophets and is explained in the New Testament, his spirit, his ruach, his breath, is always set apart because it's always called Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit. It's always called Spirit of Truth, so it's always true. But it is not a comforter. That was mistranslated. It's always redeeming. The word there instead of comforter was redeemer. And so with his spirit, his ruach being that way, his fruit of the ruach, pri ruach, would be just as much set apart, true, and redeeming. So when we have his fruit from the Spirit in our lives, in our heart, and it's growing, we have his set apartness, his truth, and his redeeming activity growing within us, making those changes in us every day. And we see it here in the Torah portion and the way it's being set up here, the set apartness. When people get frustrated, when people get irritated, when people are angry, whenever they're depressed, they have this tendency to want to have a temper tantrum with the Most High, saying, show yourself to me. That's really the wrong thing to request. If it's true that he's omnipresent, then instead of showing himself, he's already there because he's omnipresent. Then the question should really be, will you reveal yourself more? In order for us to get something out of a study, when we open the Bible or we open anything up, in order for us to get anything out of it other than an academic or cursory reading, if he doesn't reveal it to us, we're stuck. So even in a study, we have to be able to get something out of it. To get something out of it, We've got to read it. We've got to turn to him and hope that we'll get some resemblance, some aspect of his set apartness so we can do something with our heart with even what we're studying. Every time. We should be looking for that. And the only evidence we have of it to begin with are the fruits of the Spirit. That's how we identify the presence and activity of the Spirit. Because the fruits of the Spirit are set apart, and they're true, and they're redeeming. So here he establishes that the people are going to experience something, they're going to interact with him, but they're going to do it on his terms, not their terms. And that's one of the problems people through the centuries have had. They want to make demands on him for him to meet them on their terms instead of us having a desire to meet him on his terms. And here it's very clear he is setting up his terms, his parameters. He's not asking anybody, how do you feel about this? What do you think of what I'm doing? Give me your opinion. He's not asking anybody any of these things. He's simply saying, this is the way you're going to do it. And if anybody violates it, they come too close, they're going to die. So, in 10, Vayomer, and Yahweh said to Moshe, go to the people, prepare them today and tomorrow, and let them be ready on the third day. On the third day, Yahweh, second person, shall descend in full view of the people. Now, this is quite an event. This never happened with Yavot, the fathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov. This never happened with them. This had never happened with Moshe before. This didn't happen before the Exodus. This didn't happen after the Exodus. This is a new event. This is a new precedent-setting interaction. So we have a new level of intimacy that we're going to experience. We have a new level of understanding we're going to have. The Most High is doing something with our people he has not done before. And he's going to give Moshe recognition as representing him that no one has ever had before. So now I have to ask you a question, and I hope I don't offend anybody. Did Yeshua ever do this? Did Yeshua ever tell the people, do something like this because he's going to show us tomorrow more of himself? He's going to talk to us. He's going to validate me in more ways than we've done. Yeshua never experienced anything like this. The Most High never told him to do this. This happened with Moshe. It didn't happen with any other prophet. What do you think about this?
Guess it
Anyone?
wasn't necessary for Yeshua to do that.
Sí,
Wasn't his time yet.
How would you know that?
No, he's saying that Yeshua didn't do anything like this during his ministry.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Thank you for clarification. So,
Well, there was when he was transfigured, and Moses and someone else appeared, and he had John and one of the other disciples with him, and they said, "Lord, shall we build you tabernacle?" And he said, "No." So Yeshua manifested himself in a manner that way.
Okay. So where is your comparison and contrast here?
That's the closest thing I can think of to Elohim appearing to the mass like that. That's the closest comparison I can think of.
Well, on the face of what you've said in the Peshat, in the simple sense, I would agree that did happen. However, were the people told to stay away? Were the people told not to be there? He brought two with him. So the premise of it was changed as well.
Well, he didn't invite the rest of them, only those two. And
But it was only those two.
right, only those two. And I'm sure if they had reached out and tried to touch the transcended figures there, they probably would have been
How can
burned
you
up.
be sure that if it doesn't say it?
I can't.
Okay. Well, here's where we would step into error and study if we chose to bring something into it that isn't there.
Well, we can't think of any similar incident in the New Testament.
Well, the only point that I was making with the comparison and the contrast was it was really a comparison of apples and oranges.
Because the transfiguration and the resurrection.
Okay. Here, the Most High is introducing a new facet in his relationship with the people he's bringing into covenant. With Yeshua, Israel was already in covenant. Yeshua, he said he'd only come for the lost sheep of Israel. He didn't even come for all of Israel. And yet when he spoke at this time on this hill, this mount, and you use the word transfigured, I won't argue with the word. It's probably the best word in English that you could use. Okay. But it's also an interesting study in that area to see what happened to the two followers of Yeshua that were with him during those events. Okay. However, I threw it out there, waiting to see who was going to bring this up, because it would be a difference in discussion between apples and oranges. Okay. They're both fruit, but that's as close as they get. There's nothing wrong with what you said, and it was good to bring it up because it's a worthwhile study within itself. Okay. Now, we have Moshe there speaking with Yeshua, as you said, right?
That's right.
Moshe is identified as being there, right?
Yep.
And he's there with Yeshua on the hill.
Yep.
Okay. Well, what does that say for how the Most High said, you will not cross over, you won't enter in?
Well, he limited the number of people who could attend. He just limited to those two disciples, not to the other.
That
Yeah.
wasn't what I asked you, my friend. It identifies Moshe as being there talking to Yeshua on the hill. And yet, the Most High, because of Moshe's disobedience and not letting the people give him honor, he said, you won't cross over and you won't enter in. And yet there was Moshe speaking to Yeshua in Israel.
Well, because by this time, Moses was physically dead, but he was spiritually alive in spirit in the Lord's presence. And so the Lord called him to that event. Go up to.
I really appreciate your effort to talk around that.
I'm not trying to talk. I'm trying to answer your question.
I know, I'm picking at you a little bit.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I wonder if any other people have any thoughts. If any of the other attendees have any thoughts about.
Oh, we want to share this a little bit now. Okay.
Maybe Moshe, to use a modern word, reincarnated, or to give the English translation of the Hebrew phrase, the wheel of souls. Maybe Moses was brought back and given another chance to grow.
Well, I think Moses, having died physically, I'm sure he went to be with the Lord, and so his presence was needed at that particular time. So he was there
In the spirit.
in spirit.
Does it say that Moshe died?
It did, yeah, he died. He wasn't allowed to go, and he wasn't allowed to go in the promised land. And
There's an idiomatic expression that's used with our people. It says that we sleep with our fathers. But it does say of the pagan and the Gentile and the unbeliever that they die. And it does speak of the dead.
well, that's what he was absent from physical life. He wasn't breathing and like we are.
I bring that up for the purposes of introducing it to you and for future study.
Heard that expression.
Okay. And our people have never expressed themselves as a person dying, but as sleeping with our fathers.
Well, that's what we.
And yet we have another time when King Shaul, the first king of Israel, uses a soothsayer, someone who is able to bring up the dead, and she brings up a prophet.
And he said, "Hey, why did you wake me up?"
Yes, specifically. And we use that as a precedent setting passage.
Also in the New Testament says that people are sleeping and some will be, everybody's going to wake up, some to everlasting shame, others to have everlasting blessing.
Mhm.
So you are familiar with it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
So after we sleep with our fathers physically, are we conscious or do we all sleep? Because it also says absent from the body, present with
Just
the
in
Lord.
presence of the Lord. Mhm. It's a Corinthians.
Is that a contradiction or is it?
How can it be a contradiction when the Most High is omnipresent?
Exactly.
But are we conscious?
Are we?
Well, if we're present with him, would that not also say that we would be present with his revealed presence?
I don't know. I would think so.
Because if he's omnipresent, then the only difference between knowing if he's here or not here would be whether he revealed that presence.
We should be in the presence of the Lord. Maybe.
So I'm bringing up this area for consideration. That's all.
Okay.
However, I cannot give you an English version of an exact science to answer in a black and white way your question. We can only go with what's revealed to us in Scripture and either agree or disagree on it.
I think the reference we were looking at brought on eagle's wings. I think in English that's figurative. They weren't literally brought on eagle's wings. They were led out of Egypt.
I would be careful with that because it is a area of speech that is coming from the Most High.
but people have translated what came from the Most High, and it may not be a perfect translation in English.
Well, it does say pretty much the same thing, eagle on eagle's wings in Hebrew. So my only suggestion to you is to regard the verbiage when Most High speaks at least as much as you regard the verbiage that is where it says that Yeshua is speaking. You might want to consider how you regard what the Most High actually speaks or as it records what he has spoken. Okay? If it's Moshe speaking or somebody else speaking, then if there's a doubt, that's a person born of a woman. But in regards to what we read, that is, there's evidence that it has come from him, his voice, his words. You might want to give that a moment's consideration. Nonetheless, there's a tremendous amount here. The way that he brought us to him, and it says, if you earnestly hearken to my voice, which in and of itself, regardless of what is said, he says, hearken to my voice and observe my covenant. Has he made us his people yet?
And he says, don't go near your wives for 3 days. Be ready for the third day and don't be with your wife.
Does he say that here?
Yeah, in verse 15, he says, everybody get ready, wash your clothes. Sanctified, be ready for the third day. Do not come near your wives.
Where does it say that?
Verse 15 of
And
chapter
19.
19.
I'm picking at you.
Yeah, I know you are. Well, anyway,
Go to the people today and tomorrow.
we can just
separate.
imagine all the assembly, but think maybe 1 million people by that time there at a safe distance from the mountain, and then the dark black clouds. cover the-
Actually, what it says from Hebrew is not to come near to a woman, but the verbiage for woman there is for a married woman. So you can easily say, because it says the word used for woman there is a married woman. Okay.
Oh, no, what?
Let me depart from the lesson for a moment, and I'd like to read you something from the Jewish Orthodox Bible. Okay, written by Dr. Philip Goebel. Okay. And so I just want to read this seed because of the way it's coming up here. Okay. Now, he's going to speak of the question of the rendering in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 7:14. Therefore, Yahweh himself shall give you an oath, a sign. Hene, behold, Ha'alma. Alma means the unmarried young virgin. Shall conceive and bear Ben, a son, and shall call Shemo, his name, Emmanuel. Elohim is with us. Now, I got to read for a few paragraphs because I want you to understand how extensive this is for an understanding. From Isaiah's writings, we learn that stubborn and unteachable people, like the proud religious leaders in Isaiah chapter 28 and proud King Ahaz in chapter 7, don't lower themselves to factor in signs. But a sign of tongues will be given to the unbelievers in Isaiah chapter 28. And to Ahaz and the house of David, a sign will be given of the unmarried young virgin conceiving. A potentially scandalous sign, would you say, would we think of a teenage unwed mother? Furthermore, this sign will be given whether Ahaz wants it or not. Judging from their young woman rendering of Ha'alma, apparently many Ahaz Bible translators have not wanted it. When we think of the virgin, the only other times in the entire Tanakh that we see the expression Ha'alma, the virgin, is that unmarried young virgin Rivka or Rebecca in Bereshit Genesis 24 through and 43, who was preparing in that passage to conceive the nation of Israel. And that young unmarried virgin Miriam, who is preparing to bring forth the Savior of the Exodus in 2 and 8 of Exodus. So let's begin our discussion by pointing out that there are only 3 Ha'alma virgins in Scripture. The mother of Mashiach, Isaiah 7:14, and the mother of the nation of Israel, Genesis 24 and 43, and Miriam the virgin, pointing us to the Savior of the Exodus in Exodus 2 and 8. But in the passage of Isaiah 7:14, Mashiach is promised. Not Yeshua, but Mashiach. What is at stake in this one word, Ha'alma? The answer is simply everything. If, according to the Hebrew Scriptures, Mashiach was not born of the Alma Virgin, then he is not the son of Elohim. He is not the anointed one, Mashiach. And we are not delivered from death's eternal judgment by the one who is God with us. Now, to say the least, it is worth probing the Scriptures to study this and related words. A passage in Judges chapter 8 mentions royal bearing in verse 18, and also the word pelegesh, concubine, verse 31. See also Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 8, where that passage infers the royal bearing in the harem of the pelegesh as concubine, and the royal bearing of Malka, queen, as legitimate royal wife, and the royal bearing of Alma, who is in the harem, has the royal bearing of Betula, or virgin, not merely young woman, since a young woman would throw a question on hereditary rights to the throne, and that any young woman who was only that, only a woman, only young, and then introduced into the harem other than a virgin could destabilize the dynastic heirdom. For the reason that in dynastic monarchy, the child would normally be of the king's body, begotten, and there can be no question about this fact. So in this matter, the 3 classes of women in the harem, Malka, Pelegesh, and Alma Betula, Song of Solomon 6 and 8, are crucial technical terms having to do with not only sexual matters vis-a-vis the king, but political matters vis-a-vis the succession of government of the dynastic monarchy. This matter of royal bearing of the Alma as Betula, or virgin, is decisive in translating Isaiah 7:14, Ha'alma as the virgin, particularly here since the context of Beth David, verse 13, shows a royal Alma, not just any Alma, is in view. See Song of Songs 6 and 8. There are 80 Malachut, queens, and 80 Pelagishim, concubines, and without number, Alamot, virgins, singular, Alma, Alam, young man, 1 Samuel 20 and 22, 17 and 56. And so what I'm reading to you extends for 2 more pages, and it speaks of all the different words used to describe women. Okay, so every time a word is used to describe a woman, it has particular importance in that area of scripture. And so I'm letting you know that the time it took in his translation of the Orthodox Jewish Bible, he gave an awful lot of particular information that makes a difference in understanding that may not be available in English.
Because the translation comes down to us as wives. Do not come near your wives. So in other words, it must mean to avoid sexual relations with your wives during that time.
Well, it can easily mean sexual intimacy. It can also easily mean distraction, because when a man is married to a woman, the woman's first duty is to her husband, and she is his property in marriage. That's the basis of the institution of marriage the Most High set up, regardless of how anybody may feel about it in any country or any society or any culture. As well, if a man is regarding his wife first, he's not giving the Most High his complete attention. So there's a lot of reasons that says, and don't come near to a married woman. Now, slavery was common in these days, and some of the people during this time, some of the Egyptians that left with them left as slaves to the Hebrew people. And you had a mixed multitude, some of which had slaves. So I'm sharing with you, when it says don't come near a married woman, it may not be your own wife. It can also be interaction, speaking to them. Okay, so there's a precedent here not to come near them for any reason at all. No matter what the subject, no matter what the interaction, don't take your attention off of this event that's happening.
Okay.
Elohim wants complete attention to himself.
Absolutely. And then in continuing in verse 16, so that on the third day at daybreak, when darkness was forced away, in other words, there was thunder, lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very strong blast of the shofar. All the people in the camp trembled within this experience. Moshe brought out the people from the camp toward Elohim, Yahweh actually, and they stood at the foot of the mountain, the base of it. Mount Sinai was all in smoke because Yahweh descended on it in fire. We are told in several places that the Most High is a consuming fire, and he continually uses fire to ascend and descend as a fact. Its smoke rose like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain shook violently. If that mountain is shaking, there's more than one reason the Most High told the people not to get to the mountain. The blast of the shofar continued to grow louder. Now, I might want to point out that it has been said by teachers in the past that here in this area, we always make an assumption that our people are blowing the shofar. It never says our people are blowing the shofar. The shofar is being blown as he comes down. That might be an indicator that it is his messengers, his servants, blowing the shofar. We don't know for sure. It simply says that the shofar continues to be blown and to grow louder. How long can a man in one breath blow the shofar for it to continue to grow louder? It's just a small thing to point out for consideration and study. Moshe spoke, And Yahweh answered him audibly.
Mhm.
And then it says, Yahweh descended onto the summit of Mount Sinai. Yahweh called Moshe to the summit, and Moshe ascended. Now, let me ask you a question. It says Yahweh called Moshe and Moshe ascended. In all of our lives, in our relationship with the Most High, how often does He call on us and we answer the first time? How often does He answer a prayer and we receive that answer the first time without question? How often does He make Himself known to us and we respond the very first time right then? It's just a consideration. And then Yah says to Moshe, go down, warn the people, lest they break through to Yahweh and to look. Many of them might perish. Even the priests who approach Yah to look, many of them might perish. So who has been made priest thus far? Who are the priests he's referring to?
Kohanim.
Which Kohanim? Who has been made Kohanim?
Sons of Aaron.
Say again.
Sons of Aaron.
Have the sons of Aharon or Aharon been made priests and high priests? Or is it only the priests of the firstborn? Again, it's a consideration for more study. Because it's the Most High who speaks of the Kohanim here. He does not differentiate here between whether it's priests of the firstborn or any other priests. He speaks of the Kohanim as all Kohanim. This is one of the few times when we can see that, where he's not making a difference between the Kohanim. Moshe says to Yah, the people cannot ascend, for you have warned us, saying, set a border for the mountain and set it apart. And Yah says to him, go and descend, then come up with Aharon. But the priests and the people may not break through to ascend to Yah, lest he break through and destroy them. So Moshe did as he told. He descended and said to the people. So we see a continuation here. Yah spoke all these words, saying, and here, what do we have here in Shemot and Exodus 20 here in these first few verses? Ani, Yahweh, your Elohim, who took you out from the land of Egypt, from the house of slavery. You must not have any other gods besides me. He didn't say over me. He says other than me. And then he continues it. Don't make for yourself any idol nor any image of what is in the heavens above, nor what is in the earth below, nor of what is in the waters beneath the earth. Do not bow down to them. Do not worship them. For Ani, I am. Ani, Yahweh, your Elohim, a jealous Elohim, who reckons the iniquity of the fathers on their children, and on the third and fourth generation of those who despise me. But I show kindness for 2,000 generations to those who love me and observe my commandments. Now, based on what we know about genealogies, have we even come 100 generations from this time? Or even from the time of Abraham? Does anybody know?
No.
They say we haven't even gotten to 50. It's another consideration of how reliant we are on the promises made to Abraham. Because when he said, you will be the father of many nations, and then he said thousands, not thousands singular, thousands plural. And here we have 2,000 generations. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you? I show kindness for 2,000 generations to those who love me and observe my commandments.
All the generations.
Go ahead.
All the generations.
Yes. Do not swear by the name of Yahweh your Elohim in vain. For Yahweh will not acquit one who swears by his name in vain. What does that mean, in vain? Anybody know? It means to make his name common or to use it without reverence. Would you put his name Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh on a t-shirt or a pair of tennis shoes on the side of a car? He's very strict when it comes to the use of his name. That has never changed. There's nothing wrong with using his name with reference, but you can't make it common without a set apartness. There's also nothing wrong with saying Adonai, Adon, the Most High. There's a lot of ways we have to address him. Michael has told me of a movement called the Sacred Name Movement. And I was doing conferences among them without ever knowing what they call themselves. Michael told me they're also called the Hebrew Roots Movement. I didn't know of any such movement either. And as much as I've been among them at different times, nobody took the time to tell me where I was treading. Keep the Shabbat and sanctify it. The word actually for keeping the Shabbat or to commemorate the Shabbat is to guard it. Anybody remember what that word guard is in Hebrew?
Shomer.
Shomer, yes. Yes. For 6 days you may labor and do all your work. The seventh day is the Shabbat of Yah, your Elohim. You may not do no work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servant, your maidservant, your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your town's gates, because in 6 days Yah made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh blessed the seventh day and set it apart. So when we actually enter in on the seventh day Shabbat, we're entering into his set apartness. There's a very interesting passage in the writing of Hebrews chapter 4, where he talks about how he gets angry with people who try to enter into his rest, his Shabbat, without being right. And he says, no, in my anger, they will not enter in my Shabbats with me. It gets real interesting with that passage. Now, it also says to honor your father and your mother, so that your days shall be prolonged in the land that Yah your Elohim has given you. It's interesting. He sets a precedent to honor your parents so that your days might be long where he has given you to live. Do not murder. It doesn't say do not kill. It says specifically from Hebrew, do not murder. Don't commit adultery. This word adultery is applied here is not talking about a sexual offense in marriage. Adultery is going after other gods and forsaking him or worshiping other gods the same way you worship him. He will not share his honor with anybody. And when we worship him and him alone, he does get honor from that. Do not steal. Do not testify falsely against your fellow. Do not covet your fellow's house, your fellow's wife, his servant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or anything that belongs to your fellow. And then all the people perceived the thunder, the flames, the blast. Somebody might want to continue reading for me for a moment. I'm looking for the recorder that was over here.
Over here.
All the people experienced the thunder, the lightning, the sound of the shofar, and the mountain smoking.
It's something that you
When the
do.
people saw it, they trembled. Standing at a distance, they said to Moshe, "You speak with us, and we will listen. Don't let God speak with us, or we will die." Moshe answered the people, "Don't be afraid, because God has come only to test you and make you fear him, so that you won't commit sins." So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe approached the thick darkness where God was.
Please reread that passage.
All the people experienced the thunder, the lightning, the sound of the shofar, and the mountain smoking. When the people saw it, they trembled. Standing at a distance, they said to Moshe, "You speak with us, and we will listen. But don't let God speak with us, or we will die." Moshe answered the people, "Don't be afraid, because God has come only to test you and make you fear him, so that you won't commit sin." So the people stood at a distance, but Moshe approached the thick darkness where God was.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the first time that people say to Moshe, "You speak to us," instead of the Most High. They deferred from the Most High speaking to them to Moshe. And at that time, they said they would rather hear it from a man than hear it from the Most High himself. So this brings a question. The Most High chose Moshe.
Yes.
Set him apart from the people. are we able to choose ourselves to be set apart like that? To have that kind of relationship with the Most High?
Can.
Can we?
Yes.
I would disagree with you. Because the Most High chose Moshe.
Yeah.
The Most High chose us all.
Yes, he does choose us.
He can choose us,
can
but we
choose
don't
us.
choose him.
We don't choose him. But once we get committed to him, we can stay fast on him.
Okay, once he's chosen us.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how many people do you consider that he's chosen that have responded to him for greater intimacy?
Very few.
Many are called, few are chosen.
Yes.
Now, as John read, do not fear, for Yah has come in order to test you, in order that his fear may be upon you, so that you do not sin. It's interesting the different places we find the Most High does not tempt us, but he will test us. And it says he desires his fear to be upon us, to reverence him. So we're given different ways in different places. In order to reverence him, do you think our familiarity with him and study breeds a lack of reverence for him? Where we might want to just kind of sit back and say, well, I'm going to call him my daddy. Is that irreverent? Or does it only bear the appearance of being irreverent? What's the difference between how you address your earthly father? Do you call him your earthly father? Did you call him father? Did you call him dad? Did you call him daddy? Did you call him papa or pa? In different languages, we have similarities there. But in what expression of how you call your father is disrespectful to him, irreverent?
Hey, old man.
Well, in China, when you say, hey, old man, that's a form of respect for his wisdom and experiences.
But our culture is different.
Oh, okay.
There's a difference.
When you say it that way, it means you're just a snotty kid who thinks he's bigger than his britches.
Okay. I'm letting you see how much can be interwoven in the simpleness of what we're reading. Now, even here he says, so that you do not sin.
Mhm.
Sin, by definition, is disobedience to Torah. Torah is defined as teaching, instruction, direction. The root word of Torah, Yara, is hitting the mark, like an arrow going to a target. Whereas sin is often referred to as missing the mark. Why do you think those two different definitions relate to each other? the root word of Torah meaning hitting the mark, and sin, the root word missing the mark. Now, do you think if people today were to get this kind of an exhibition, how they would feel about what Christians call the Old Testament? Would it take this kind of an introduction for them to think differently?
You mean if we actually saw something like this, thunder and lightning and smoke on top of a mountain?
If you experienced it, yes.
Some people would, some people wouldn't. Depends on the person, who's
In
beholding.
the individual.
Well, he hardened Fable's heart.
Mhm.
He can harden other people's heart too.
We read in the New Testament Revelation that the false prophet's going to make lightning, fire come down from heaven in the sight of men. And people are going to go, oh, wow, they're going to be deceived. So people could be impressed by a pyrotechnic display like the one we see here in Exodus.
But it's clarifying those are the people that get deceived, the one they don't know the word of God.
That's right.
That's the clear.
Yes. Well, what makes the biggest difference? How do you know, as they would say, the real McCoy?
When you are abiding in the Almighty, you will know the difference right away, because you humble yourself every single day and cry up to Him for knowledge and wisdom, to know the difference when it's a deceiver and when it's the truth.
There's nothing that you've said that I could argue with.
Mhm.
However, could we say in its simpleness that only the Most High can reveal the set apartness?
Yes. Like He says, you ask, you shall receive.
Now, Michael, even though we started a little bit late, it's about 20 to 2. Does anybody need to take a break?
Yeah, that's a good time for a break. Let's meet back here around a few minutes to 4 o'clock.
All right, then.
Before
Baruch
4
Hashem.
o'clock. What time is it?
20 minutes to 4.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
20
geez,
minutes.
20 minutes to 4.
Okay.
Oh, all right, 4 o'clock. Okay, we're good.
Well, what do you think, Michael?
It's a good study today. Line upon line, precept by precept.
Little different from last week?
What was that, sir?
A little bit different than last week?
Yes. One year, quite a while back, we used to have a used clothing store in the local area, and a brand new leather vest had come in. And it still had all the price tags on it. And so I bought it because one of my friends in the Sacred Name movement down in Missouri wore black leather vests. And so I gave it to him. And the brand of leather was Wilson Leather. And my friend, his last name is Wilson. So in the card, when I gave it to him, I quoted Isaiah, line upon line, precept upon precept. I put Isaiah, in whatever year he lived, I forget now, it was maybe 700 or something. I put 2013, Wilson upon Wilson.
What do you think, Mark?
Good message. Lots of things I didn't know before.
Okay. I had laryngitis for a couple of days this week, so I guess I haven't fully got my voice back.
Okay, sure. And once it's tender, then it takes a little while. I've told you about that root, OSHA root.
Yeah.
Some OSHA root cough syrup would be good for you. Some of the Native Americans referred to it as singing root because it soothes and it's a topical anesthetic. So it makes your voice much more comfortable.
You have it up there?
No, actually, ironically, I had referred it to Jeremy, and he had a bottle of it.
Well, send me the information. Text it to me.
Sure. Up here, I've just bought the root and chewed on it, but it's pretty rough, and very few people care for the flavor of it. It's a
I
cross.
can understand that.
Yeah, it's a cross between really intense celery and clove. So it's a lot of people that I've shared with have spit it out immediately.
Okay.
I like it. So it's also an antiviral herb.
Okay.
So I'll send you some information on it.
Okay. We ready to get started for the rest of it?
Yeah. Frankie and Hannah, are you guys back yet? Hi.
Say hi.
Hi.
There we go.
Okay, I think we can get started again. I haven't heard anything from them. Maybe they'll just listen in.
All right. Baruch Hashem. Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch Hashem. Shalom, shalom.
If we can start back up again. In verse 18 of chapter 20, Yahweh said to Moshe again, this is what you should say to the sons of Israel. You have seen that I spoke to you from heaven. In 19, of course, do not make the likeness of anything that is with me, and do not make for yourselves silver gods or golden gods. You shall make an earthen altar for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings of your sheep and your cattle. Every place where I allow my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. Now, this is a pretty important precedent-setting little passage here. Okay? Every place where I allow my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. This gives us an indicator that as we submit to him more and seek to be more intimate with him, he will even be the one to give us that little urge inside whether or not it's the right time and place to even say his name. Because he says every place where he allows his name to be mentioned. So even the mentioning of his name should be something that he stirs us to do. And he says that I will come to you and bless you. And he says, if you make me a stone altar, do not build it of hewn stones, for by wielding your sword on them, you shall profane them. So he doesn't want any of our works done. He only wants his works through us. And then he says in verse 22, do not ascend by steps onto my altar, so that your nakedness shall not be exposed on it. In Hebrew, we're actually taught to not ascend 3 steps as we're stepping up to the altar. It's a real interesting area. And that's the extent of the parashah. And I'd like to cover something with you. The beginning of the 7 rules of Hillel. We talked about the Pardes before. So the first rule of Hillel, and by the way, Hillel did not invent them. He did not start them. He only used them. But because he was a teacher, they're attributed to him because he used them so often. And the first one is, okay, Kalva Homer, light and heavy. It's a thought form used to make an argument for lesser based on a greater weight, a lesser weight to a greater weight. It's expressed in more than a few ways. The most common way that you see it in scripture, how much more? Okay. So if you know what to do right, how much more important is it for you to do right? Okay. There are 7 of them, but I guess we'll stick with covering 1 a week. This one is light and heavy. And some more of the more common areas, and I'll give them to you as a list here briefly, would be Proverbs 11 and 31.
Proverbs 11:31.
And Yirmiyahu with Jeremiah 12:5.
Jeremiah 12:5.
And some others would be Devarim, Deuteronomy 31 and 27. And 1 Samuel 23 and 3. Ezekiel 15 and 5. and Esther 9 and 12. Those are the primary examples that I have for us dealing with those. Now,
Say the last reference again, please. Esther, maybe?
9 and 12. Chapter 9, verse 12. These are just examples of how you could use the argument. Now, there's two ways to use the argument. When the argument is implied or whenever it's explicitly used. The first one, when it's explicit, is generally referred to as meforash, and whenever it's implied, it's considered satum. So either way, these are the two recognized forms of light and heavy. Okay. Now, there's a lot of places you can look this up. I'm not by far, I'm not the only one that has the information. And so I would strongly suggest you look these up. They're used in the New Testament without people realizing it. Yeshua used them in his teachings publicly. Okay. So all the rules of Hillel, he used quite a bit without people realizing it, where they were coming from. So I wanted to further this along a little bit. And I wanted to share something with everybody. The same place where I originally met Mike in East Texas, okay, out there in Emory, Texas, Pastor John, he invited me back a few times to teach, and there was a lady from farther east in Texas. She was an older lady, and she was on a very limited income. She chose to start giving me $8 a month out of her income. I told her, as I told many others, take care of your monthly maintenance first, and whatever else you got left over, if the Most High persuades you in your heart, well, then you give your offering. If you're close enough, if you want to give bread or fruit, or you want to give wine, whatever the normal classes of offerings are, they're both all acceptable. If you want to give a sheep or a goat from under the crook of your staff, okay, all the normal acceptable offerings. It also says in Proverbs to give from your wages and earnings, your profits. Okay. And so she chose to give $8 a month from what she had. She did that for better part of 8 or 9 years. Well, she passed away this past week, and her son called me because I got an offering from her I never got before. It was over $100. And he told me that his mother urged him to send that exact amount. That amount was used to pay the electricity, since we didn't quite have the funds to do that at that time, unexpectedly. So the day after that, she passed. And she urged him to speak with me and talk to me. And he felt that he wanted to honor her memory by giving. And I admonished him, said, no, honor your mother by keeping her in your heart and her memory alive and with you. And he said, that's the very reason I'm going to give to you. And so I just wanted to share that. I used to send lessons to her that I would have to write out by hand. And her son would read it to her because her eyes were failing. And so that was the only way that he knew me, was from those lessons and reading them to his mother. And so in her passing, that closed the 9-year journey between she and I. And unbeknown to me, her son, who now wants to receive more lessons. So I just wanted to share that with you, that you can have some pretty sweet people and people that really seek the Most High with everything within them, And they can be close to you or far from you, and you know they're still there. I just want to share that with you briefly. Now, once you learn the 7 rules of Hillel, uh, you've learned something that's going to stay with you, and you can use them repeatedly in many different environments. Okay? Beyond the 7 rules of Hillel, you got the 13 rules of Ishmael, and it gets real interesting because after that, you also have the 32 rules of Eleazar. Most of them are very similar. They get a little bit more explicit in study. But for a little while, we're going to stick with the basic 7 rules of Hillel to study Torah. And so if you want to employ them, that would probably help your study. If you choose not to, that's okay. We're not doing a course here. You're not going to fail a test. You're okay. Now, I'd like to make a suggestion, whether we're doing a Torah portion or we're doing any other study. If you get used to working with the rules, see how many times you can plug them in, see how they lead you in using the pardes, and see how that helps your study. You'll be amazed sometimes at where it'll take you. Now, I would suspect that John and his wife have spent a lot of years studying, and from their positions and their perspectives, they've gained a lot that they can obviously share now. And through that sharing, we'll all be better for it. Mark has some study underneath his belt. He's got a different perspective from his background. So as he shares more, that'll still help all of us a little bit. Michael, of course, it's his ministry with his wife, his assembly and congregation. So as they start having people over, that might change the way that the online teaching is conducted. So we'll work with that as it happens. And so I would like everybody to consider a couple of ideas. Okay. See where the parashah study leads you, and sometimes consider sharing that. Okay. One of the nicest things about open forum study is everybody can jump in there and they can add to the study and bring their perspectives, and we can see where it takes us. Now, unless somebody's against the idea, I'm probably going to be calling on more people to get more involved as we study. Now, probably in the next few weeks, I'm going to start asking if you've got questions that nobody seems to have been able to answer. I want you to bring them up. You'd be amazed at the questions that can be answered whenever we bring those things up. Okay? I probably won't answer them in the same day that they're asked because I'd like to give everybody a week or two to read and study and search and see what they can come up with to answer the question. And if they can't, well, then we'll answer it different ways. But if you got questions that simply have not been answered still, we can bring those up. The other thing that I would like for you to consider, there is a way to bring people in a group together. When I used to go to Oklahoma and Missouri, I would pick out people as I was teaching, and I would ask them to pick out one of their favorite verses and read it. and just see what Yahweh would bring forth and how he would connect seemingly unrelated verses and passages from all around the room. So it can be enriching. Sometimes we run into a snag or a dead end. It's not entertainment. It's really more of a way of getting everybody a little more involved. And let's see what we can do with that. Now, John had mentioned previously about his upcoming procedure for us to pray about. I would strongly suggest that in the course of the week, if anything else comes up and you feel there's a need for prayer for yourself or anybody else, communicate that to Michael so they can determine whether or not that goes on their website or if it was just brought up during teaching. If there's anybody who has lost loved ones at any time, and if you need Kaddish to be done, either Michael and Denise can do it or we can do it online. So there's a few things that we can look at there. And right now, as typical of me, I'd like to turn it over to Michael for a little bit for everybody else to talk about today's lesson or wherever else it may have taken them.
Good, Rabbi Cohen. First of all, I'd like to open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions over the parashah or this last part of the lesson that they would like to address right now? I have something. It says that the people saw the thunder. So how do you see thunder? I know, was it been maybe a year or so ago, they had that explosion of a warehouse in, was it Syria or Lebanon, up there in Damascus? All that fertilizer blew up. You could see that pressure wave from the dust. It was something like that. I was wondering if anyone else had noticed that.
Well, nobody else seems inclined to speak. You should look at the word to see or saw, when they saw the thunder. Look at that root word.
Just for reference, we're in chapter 19, verse 16. Go ahead, Rabbi.
Now, back in Bereshit in Genesis, it says that whenever the voice of the Most High would walk in the cool of the morning, they saw his voice. So there's a reference here. You can see a voice. You can see thunder. There's another reference that's never translated into English. It's omitted in most translations of actually being able to see a bracha, a blessing. So that is an interesting study. You had two scholars do a study on that. However, they're not available in English. And so you brought up a most interesting thing. If you like, in a future lesson, we can delve into that.
Definitely. Also, you were talking about a shofar blast, and most of us, we're aware a shofar is a ram's horn or a trumpet, but it's made from an animal horn. Anyway, one time was when they had the 4 blood moons on the annual Moedim. So this was several years ago. But we were walking up. It was on, I think, the first day of Sukkot, which is Shomer, which is Shabbat Shabbaton. we were walking up to the first assembly, and it was in the morning, probably late morning. But the person walking with me is spiritually a very sensitive person. And they stopped and said, "Did you hear that?" I was like, "No, what are you talking about?" They said, "A shofar blast from heaven, a really long shofar blast from heaven." So it was just, I thought I would share that. That still happens to today. So it happened the day that was. Not only was it on one of the annual pilgrimage Moedim, it was on a Shabbat, and there was a blood moon that month. So kind of interesting. Well, does anyone else have any other comments? Anything you want to share?
Can you say a few things about the conference next week?
Say it again.
There's a conference next week.
The conference is on, I think, February 22nd.
Okay.
So that's in about a month.
Okay.
Will it be online?
Yes.
Zoom conference?
Just like we meet on Zoom here.
Oh, okay.
So we'll take several breaks throughout the day, but it's a chance to sit down and immerse in it. The idea for this came because how I met Rabbi Cohen was attending a Bible study weekend, and where we did this kind of a study meeting on Friday night, all day Saturday, and then on Sunday morning also. And so because of COVID, because of the winter, all these things, it would be very difficult for us to get together in person. But we can do it easily on this Zoom format. And so that's what it is.
Okay.
So,
Good.
but should it meets the needs of the people. And you know, if you were going to attend a conference like this, you'd spend a lot of money in traveling, lodges, meals while you're out of town. So it's a very inexpensive way to do it too.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.